So, where exactly has the spark gone?
Well, today I want to talk about committed relationships and where they first began.
By committed relationships, you mean long-term relationships?
Yes,
or-
people who have got together and have made some sort of arrangement where they live together in the same house. I mean, they may be married, they may not be married, but they've chosen to make a go of it. And at the very beginning of time, really, basically, this was set up basically for financial reasons, to give some form of security to the woman and the children that were born. And the guy used to probably work in the fields or whatever it is. And things have gone a long way and changed a lot. There was really no romantic love at that stage. It was often an agreement between parents, and social status, etc. And nowadays, probably in the past 100, 200 years, but particularly since the nuclear family post-war, the family has found itself increasingly isolated.
What exactly do you mean by the nuclear family?
Well, the nuclear family is basically the couple and the children. And because of society and the way things have happened, materialism, they tend to find that they move around and they leave their family of origin and the villages that they lived in. So they no longer have the supportive structure of the elongated family. So you can no longer go and tell your woes if you're a teenager to Auntie Sally or to Granny, whatever. And everything is incredibly focused on your partner and the demands of your partner, to such a degree that in this day and age, if you're in a relationship of any kind, man, woman, gay, straight, whatever, there are great demands. Someone's got to pay the mortgage. You've got to love the person. He's got to be your friend, or she's got to be your friend. You've got to be a parent. You've got to love the recreation they do. You've got to join in everything. They're friends. And that is an amazing demand on a single person or a couple. So what happens to the relationship?
Well, you tell me, what does happen to the
relationship? We go back to the time of the romantic love, where you first fell in love, and that lasts, we think, 2 or 3 years or so, and then reality sets in, and you've got responsibilities, you've got to buy a house together or whatever it is, and your relationship gets a little more dull.
So are you saying that at the beginning of the relationship there's a kind of fantasy situation where you're...
Yes, I mean, I would say that when you fall in love, there's a lot of fantasy involved. And in fact, many of our thoughts and desires are based on that. Basically, man has two drives. They want to be safe and secure. They want someone to love them. They want to know they're going to get food and they're going to live in a house and they've got someone, behind their back. And on the other side, we have erotic desire, adventure, secrecy, and we delve into the shadow side. By that I mean, the darker side of somebody, the bit that I spoke about, accepting from your partner, both good and bad. But when you get into a committed relationship, perhaps children come along, and it becomes a bit mundane. Where do you find the spark? How do you love and make love continuously to the person who you already have? That is quite an ask. We live much longer these days. So in the past, you might have had a marriage that would last probably 10 or 15 years at the most. Now, marriages can go on for 60 years. And it's a lot to ask to be with one person. So there are lots of things we can do. So when you fall in love, there are fantasies that you've picked up in your conditioning as you've grown up. And the other for your partner as well is the same. But problems come along when you get together, you're living in the mundane relationship, and you lose the sense of fantasy, and all you can really concentrate on are the things that are wrong with your partner.
Which is presumably also a fantasy in a way too.
It's an
because
illusion.
not
It's an illusion
yeah.
that you thought the person was wonderful when you fell in love,
yes.
just as much as it's partly an illusion that they turn up late for your mother's lunch, because you wouldn't have addressed that when you fell madly in love. So perhaps we can look at the fact that you're complaining constantly about the thing they do wrong, which may not be as real either.
So really what we're saying is that whenever in your relationship, you're always building your own picture of the other person, and at the beginning of the relationship, when you're in love, you're throwing all this positive stuff at
Absolutely.
them, which is not necessarily true.
Not
And
completely
when
true.
things get slightly difficult in the relationship, you're starting to throw all this negative stuff, which equally isn't necessarily true.
Absolutely. And one of the words which is not used within relationships, because people don't really think about it, is imagination. Imagination is an incredibly amazing tool. As you had the fantasy of falling in love, you can also have the fantasy of recreating your desire, your dream. And it doesn't take much to actually think of ideas that take away from the mundane.
Can you give some examples of the kind of things that one can do to try and rekindle that?
Well, I mean, just think when you find yourself most attracted to your partner. It's usually when you're reuniting after a long time away from each other. If you're at a party and you see a guy or a woman flirting or looking at your partner with devouring eyes, in a crisis, those times are very precious, but in the mundane life, you seem to forget those. You know, if your girlfriend or boyfriend brings you a bottle of champagne because there's something important you're doing that day, you know, it makes you smile inside. So we've got to be able to find this within ourselves. And the problem that causes the fact that we can't do this is that, once again, we, I'm afraid, don't know who we are, and we really believe that we're not worth it because we're always being accused of doing the things which don't seem right anymore. So one of my areas, and I use it a lot in counselling, is to try to set up these little kind of baby environments, really. They're little stories where each of you tries to think out of the box a bit and surprises, wants to make a difference to your partner, to make them smile. And it's amazing how far that will take a relationship. And it's also highly important, because what happens if you don't talk in these times is that you do begin to look elsewhere. And, you know, truth and honesty in this committed relationship that you started, and, you know, perhaps you made vows at some point, or you totally agreed with each other, whatever it was, is a precious thing. And to give it all up, just like that, without talking, you might find yourself in grave difficulties, and the deed is done.
I suppose one of the difficult things is that as the relationship goes on, you start to take each other for granted.
Yeah.
But what you're taking for granted is very much your own vision of what that person is.
Totally. It's absolutely, totally your own vision. You're projecting onto that person what you're no longer happy about. And it's actually a lack of confidence in yourself. You are worth it. You are desirous. And if you talk about it, you'll go a long way to finding out what each of you would like more than you're getting. And in your vulnerability and your sharing and your naming of these things, you make your relationship stronger, not weaker.
But presumably one person has to start the process, and it's not as if, you know, both of you can agree to suddenly start talking like this, because it doesn't really work like that, does it?
Well, it's a difficult thing. You know, if you're watching this video and only one of you is watching it, then yes, I would suggest that one of you tries to up the game. But, you know, that's where counselling comes in. You know, if you both come here together, you know, I talk about probably a little, you know, other than this, really. It's trying to meet on the same playing field. And it is very important to be open and respectful of each other, and try to discuss your differences openly and share with each other what is no longer working in your eyes.
You mentioned earlier that if things don't work out on this level, there's the danger that you start looking elsewhere.
Well, nature doesn't, it abhors a vacuum, and if you're not getting what you want at home, and you feel that you're not good enough and therefore the person is not respecting you, you tend to feel in this sacrificial mode again that you'll keep it to yourself, that it's actually much kinder to do that. But unfortunately, if you're not sharing your feelings, you will share them eventually with someone else.
Well, that's interesting.
And that's a very sad affair. And it's something that, doesn't always need to happen.
Okay. Well, maybe perhaps in the next talk we could maybe look at that side of things a little bit.
Yes.
A little bit more deeply, because that's quite a difficult issue, isn't it?
Very difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you very much.